Hey guys, it's Mr. Frazier. Today is Thursday, the 2nd of April, and I'm going to post this video so we can go over story 1 from our yellow reading packet, which looks like this. So, we read this story about this brother and sister, a family that had to move because the parents found new jobs. The first skill we had was to answer some comprehension questions, and most of them we had to go back into the story and show where we found them. So let's take a look at that. The first one was, what kind of story is this? So you didn't have to go back into the story to find this. We know it wasn't a funny story. Didn't teach people how to work. Story didn't teach people a lesson. I mean, maybe in the big picture it did, but mainly it was a story about strange happenings, right? Odd stuff happened in this house or around it. So this one we didn't have to go back into the story. This one we did. So what is the difference in the children's ages? So I found out of these 4 that the only one that was true is Ben was 2 years older. Ben was 11, his sister Winnie was 9, and so just like we do in ELA, we went back to the story, found it down here, sort of in 2 different places. Here it says Ben groaned at the age of 11, and it goes on to say things about him, but there it tells us his age, and then starting the next paragraph, Winnie was 9. So now we know Ben's older than his sister Winnie by 2 years. Okay. Sorry about all the flipping. So why did Ben and Winnie move to the seashore? Mainly because their parents got new jobs. That was number 3. That was also in the beginning of the story. After a long search, Dad had found a new job. So that was part of number 3. I kept reading and I found more of it down here because then it said then their mother found an excellent job in Oceanside 2 also. So this shows that both the parents found new jobs. Okay, so number 4 said, what kind of house did the family move into? So we had a bunch of different choices here. It was a large, newly painted house near the ocean, which sounds very nice. Let's see, number 4. I found that in the 5th paragraph. I count down every time it's indented. We know that starts a new paragraph. So in the 5th paragraph, I saw that it said, it's, meaning the house, it's well kept, newly painted, and the rent is very cheap. It's a beautiful house. Where did I find it? Was by the ocean. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to have to find that. I know it's in Oceanside. Okay, so I should have done a little more with that. Maybe you can send me something on Class Dojo if you have something more than this, because the detail that I underlined didn't say anything about it being by the ocean. So maybe you can help me with that. All right, let's take a look. Number 5, why did the Dorans get the house for so little rent? Meaning that it wasn't very expensive to rent this very nice house. The answer was people said bad things happened, or bad things about the house. So that was 5. I found that on the 2nd page of the story. In the 2nd paragraph, it said they called it the Old Pickney House. Everyone thought the house was unlucky because, and it goes on to say why. And then in the next paragraph, it says that's why the rent was so cheap. The owner wants to be sure that the rent is paid before you disappear. So bad things might happen. He's got to get his rent before something happens to the renters. Number 6, what happened first? So lots of times we have questions like this. They give us 4 actual details that happened in a story, and sometimes stories don't always start in the beginning. Sometimes they start in the end, the middle. So you really have to just go back to the story and think about each one of these details and which one happened first. In this case, it was that Mr. Dorn found a new job. And so, since it happened first, this one happens to be in the beginning of the story. So it was along with a detail from number 3 that after a long search, the dad found a new job. And you can really read the information above that to make sure none of those other things happened before this. Okay. So, number 7, I thought it was interesting that the story had to do with smugglers. We learned about colonists in the new Americas smuggling in goods from Europe and trying not to pay taxes on them, right? Because they thought England was charging too high of taxes. So we're familiar with what smugglers are. And so it said, why did the smugglers want to get even with the Pickney family? And it was because the Pickneys were telling the police about the smugglers. So they were doing something illegal. They didn't want to be found out. And the family, the Pickneys that lived there, were about to tell the police about them. Let's see, I found something about that on page 3. Right here it says, it was believed the newspaper said that the Pickneys were telling the police about what the smugglers were doing. So I underline my detail that proves my answer, and I put question number 7 right next to it. And the last one, number 8. What happened in 1890? So I like these questions because I just sort of go back to the story and scan until I find the date 1890. And I saw it right here, so I see what happened then. 5 years later, in 1890, Zeke Little, a guy's name, Zeke Little, the town handyman, told everyone that he knew what had happened to the Pickneys. And I went on further, and then it said he had disappeared too. So he knew what happened to the family that disappeared, but then he disappeared also. So, yes, the detail was that Zeke Little disappeared. And the last one, you didn't have to find a detail in the story because it's just a general question. It says, what is a good name for this story? Well, you could have come up with other names, I'm sure, but out of these 4, Winnie's Cutfoot, nope, may have happened. It didn't happen in the story, but it could have happened. But the story wasn't about that. Not really about seagulls, even though they were by the ocean. They did go to a new school, but that wasn't the main idea. But the main idea, or the big thing, was they were living in this unlucky house where mysterious things had happened. Okay, so next part was vocabulary. Last week I showed you, like on a smartphone or an iPad, you can use Google search and say pronounce and then type in a word if you don't know how to pronounce the word, and it'll say it for you. So we just had to match these up. Something that's not known is a mystery. I check them off as I go. I say this to you guys too when we're taking tests. Don't cross them out because maybe you make a mistake and have to go back to it, and then you won't be able to see it. So I usually like to just put a little check mark next to it so I can still see it. Not saying a word means silent. Money paid to a state or country are taxes. These are when we get paid for a job, the state or the country takes out some of the money and uses it to, build roads and bridges and keep things working. So those are our taxes. Not old. It's like you guys, young people who bring in goods from other lands without paying taxes. Those are the smugglers. They smuggle in goods. Hated, despised is another word for hated. If you say he despised eating vegetables, he hated eating vegetables. Looking for something is searching for something. If you were made fun of, you were teased. If you called out, like made a statement, like proclaimed something, they say exclaimed. You see this in the reading a lot. It'll say, and we heard Ben, or it'll say, I'm trying to think of an example on the fly here. Help, I'm stuck down here, Ben exclaimed. So he called out. A sound of pain is a groan, and unusual or different is strange. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means it's something you're not used to, it's different to you, so we often say, well, that's strange to me. All right, then we had a little lesson about looking at a bunch of different sentences, 5 different sentences, and deciding which one was the main idea and which of the other ones were details or topic sentences and details, they had also called it. So we had to label the main idea with MI and then the details with D. So this one, I just read through all of these first and tried to make some connections. So tiny plants and animals called plankton float near the top. So I see that's about plants and animals. Fishes, squids, octopuses, and whales in the ocean eat plankton. So I see this also about animals, and it's related to this because it's talking about how they use the plankton. So these two, I sort of have something to do with each other. The sea is a home for millions of plants and animals. Okay, it's talking about both plants and animals. Animals as different as jellyfish, stingrays, eels, and sharks can be found in the ocean. So again, I think this one's talking about animals. Different kinds of seaweeds grow in the ocean and become food for sea animals. So, sort of like this one, it's talking about plants, but how sea animals use them for food. So I really see that my only main idea could be this one. So if I had a starting sentence, I would say the sea is home for millions of plants and animals. And then I would use these 4 sentences to talk about plants and animals, the millions of plants and animals that live in the sea. So the next one, the main idea was salty ocean water covers most of the world. So you can see that's sort of like, you know, a main idea statement. It's not very specific. It's sort of a big idea. And then if you look at these 4 sentences, they really just talk about different oceans and they really compare the size. Like the Pacific is the largest. The smallest one is the Arctic Ocean. Talks about the second largest ocean and the third largest. So these 4 really talk about 4 different oceans and just compare them by size. So then they're all just details about this main idea. Next thing, skill D. We had to read these little passages and then decide what the main idea was, right? Then read the 3 topic sentences given, underline the correct topic sentence for each paragraph. Yeah, so what would be the first sentence that sort of states the idea that's supported by the other sentences? So for this one, it was the reptile class has several different animals in it. For the next one, this one I thought was a little tricky because it says reptiles are cold-blooded. And then it talks about what that means. It means that their body temperature is the same as the place they live in. So animals that live in the desert, they have a high body temperature. And ones that live in cold things like snow, their temperatures become very low. So when I saw cold-blooded, I didn't really think of animals that lived in hot deserts, because I would think they would be called hot-blooded. But the word cold-blooded itself means that they change their body temperature. It doesn't just mean that they have cold blood. So this one for me was a little tricky. It doesn't mean that reptiles seldom become hot, because they can become hot. Cold-blooded animals always have low temperatures. That's where I got confused, because cold-blooded, low temperatures, I thought, yeah, that's true. But from here, we learned that it isn't. Cold-blooded can't mean that they have high, hot temperatures. So this is a way that all reptiles are alike. That they're alike because they adjust their body temperature to their surroundings. This one it's not hard to tell the difference between snakes and lizards. Yeah, because when you read in here, lizards, it says they have feet, they have eyelids, so it's pretty easy to tell the difference because lizards would have feet, right? And eyelids, so you can tell just by looking at them. And the last one was snakes are able to move in several ways. Yeah, it just talks about what their scales are like and why they're like that. So they can slide easily, so they can swim and climb, so they can move from tree to tree. So that's that one. Moving along, this was about headlines. So they gave us 4 headlines. We had to use 3 of them. The first one was a little bit tricky because it doesn't say in it that it was 100 years had gone by. So the dates don't really tell you, because this is 1840, 1848, 1883. So that's only about, a 40-year difference. This book was published in the 80s, 90s, so it was about 100 years old. So this was also the only one that talked about people uncovering or finding a fortune. This one was much easier. It talked about sudden windstorms, and it said right in it that it destroyed homes. And this one too was about a woman who gobbled down 100 pretzels in 40 minutes to win an award. So we didn't end up using this one. There was no story about furs that disappeared. And then it said you write your own headline and a story that goes with it. So you could have written anything, as long as you have, try to have an interesting headline to grab the reader's attention. So something new in all of our lives, I wrote Zoom. What's that? I'd never heard of it before this. And then gave some details about what it is. Now that the schools are closed, it's a video chat service where you can talk to your friends, or teachers can use it to see, talk, and learn with their students. And I could have said a lot more about it, but just had this little space. Last part was about expressions. So you just had to sort of think about what they really mean. The smugglers wanted to get even. So to get even meant that they wanted to get back at the Pickneys. The children picked on Ben, so they teased him and made fun of him. They didn't actually pick on him. They had next to nothing, so they had very little, which makes sense, right? Having nothing would be like 0, so having next to nothing, next to 0 is very little. Winnie was left on her own, so she was by herself. he got nowhere, so he did not succeed. Mother added her voice, so that's just a way to say she spoke up or she spoke about whatever they were talking about. Siki checked out a hiding place. So checked out, we know, means looked into. The children did not voice their fears, so they didn't say anything. They didn't put voice to it. So F was they didn't speak about it. There was no way his parents could turn that down. So to turn something down means there's no way they could say no to that low rent. And the last one, Winnie did not know when to give in, and give in means to stop fighting it, just to surrender. So, I'm going to post it on Class Dojo, but next week our story, we really went almost 2 weeks with this first story because people had contacted me and said they needed a little more time. So now, starting today, Thursday, we'll start reading story 2. It's a continuation of the Pickney and the Dorn story, so it gets a little more interesting and you find out more about what happened. Sometimes you might need somebody to read these to you. Some of us know how to read scripts, some don't, so you might want somebody to read those to you or try it on your own and then ask if you're not sure. Same thing, there's comprehension questions. I circled 1 and 2 because those, I want you to go back and find the details in the story, underline it, and number them. And same thing with number 5. Go back to the story, underline where you found it, and number it. The other ones you don't have to. Part B is more vocabulary. They give you the words and you have to match it to the definition. And there is one last part, part C, and we've done a lot of this in ELA, fact and opinion. So they just give you a bunch of statements. You have to say if the statement is a fact or an opinion. I'm not going to read all this because I'm pretty sure you know what fact and opinions are. If you don't, read over this so you get a refresher. And if you're still have problems with that, contact me on Class Dojo and let me know. I'll be happy to answer any questions. So, that's it. I'm going to post a video now on the daily language review. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.